When it comes to community and civility, the Kumeyaay peoples were once the community of San Diego.
That's right, the original indigenous people of the land.
And that changed, and with the new communities that formed, sometimes the Kumeyaay people were not as brought into the community as one might want.
Sure, that's right. There's actually a book that was written by Florence Chapek called Pushed into the Rocks, and that was kind of the historical term of, one day, many hundreds of years ago, there were Kumeyaay people in La Jolla, in Point Loma, in Old Town and downtown areas. Of course, there was a number of villages right there in Old Town, the Kasoy village, and a number of others that are actually at this point even underwater. So the Kumeyaay presence is historically there. The facts and the traces of the history are there, but since 1700s they've been pushed further east. So in some of the documentaries we talk about living out a meager existence on the fringes of society, and that's definitely what has happened. So the Kumeyaay story of survival is really a story of survival.
And with that story of survival today, how does the Kumeyaay people, how do you yourself see your position in broader San Diego society and community? Are the Kumeyaay people able to reclaim some of that presence?
So I think the Kumeyaay Nation is, Indian gaming has played a large part in what Sycuan has been able to do to bring attention to the areas that need improvement in social infrastructure and physical infrastructure within the Kumeyaay Nation on the reservations. Sycuan is probably the closest Kumeyaay land, aside with Hamul, to the urban San Diego area. A lot of the other tribes are very remote, over an hour driving to the eastern foothills. So you're talking still government trailers and dirt roads on some of these reservations. Sycuan, with the advent of Indian gaming and the economic success that Indian gaming has brought, we have committed those resources to improving not just Sycuan band's, way of life, but also the greater Kumeyaay Nation as a whole. And the first part begins with interaction, engagement. Intertribal sports, something I mentioned that my son participates in, is a great example of being able to connect and interact and communicate through sport, because a number of the tribes that participate host games so that you go to visit your other reservations, interact amongst the citizens of the local tribal communities. So that the modern sense of relation with the bands, of course, there's 13 bands in San Diego County of the Kumeyaay Nation. We're all a band of the nation, and another half a dozen south of the border. That's another area where we continue to strive to have better relations. Is south of the border. Those Kumeyaay villages down there have a strong cultural fabric, especially with pottery, basketry, and other historical Kumeyaay arts. So we like to tap on that resource, bring them north of the border, and have them come and educate us as often as they can also.
Where do you see things progressing in the future? What would be the sorts of engagement in the community you would like to see between the Kumeyaay and broader San Diego, or between everybody on coastal San Diego and the First Peoples?
Sure. So I think the engagement and the broader understanding and communication with the Kumeyaay Nation, and you got the County of San Diego. So we have relationships there, the Board of Supervisors and all of the various entities. With those supervisors, you got north and east, the eastern parts, but in the south and the north of the county, they have representation, large amount of reservations, either Kumeyaay or Luiseño when you get to the North County. So those relationships there are at the county level. City of San Diego has always been very great. I have to actually give a shout out to Mayor Faulkner and his crew. His staff been very accommodating to the Kumeyaay Nation, especially when we had to embark on how the Kumeyaay would participate in the 250th anniversary of the city of San Diego. So that brought together, I think, a perfect model of how things can work. How about bringing those players to the table and making sure that there's acknowledgement of historical injustice, and there's also that commitment to educate and to keep a evolving, ongoing relationship. That's what the Kumeyaay Nation is looking for from the city of San Diego, from the county of San Diego, from the Port District, and all the other players, Maritime History Museum, San Diego History Center. So there's a lot of relationships now that are being reinvigorated, and I would think for the most part there was just misunderstanding and lack of communication over the decades. So we've got fresh blood, new leadership, and a willingness to engage and look for less excuses not to engage, but more reasons to engage. And it's a lot about education. We, for the first time, have a California Indian in the legislature. Mr. James Ramos, former tribal chair of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians out of San Bernardino. Also Todd Gloria, great friend of the tribes, also one of the first Native Americans or part Native American in the state legislature. So there's definitely those relationships that the tribes have been building. And so closing that loop is the commitment to K through 12 curriculum for Native American history to balance out the pretty much one-sided history of early California, Spanish mission system.
Yeah, history existed long before the Spanish came here. It's just not the history that's always taught.
Right, but sometimes it's another example. Be careful what you wish for, because now that they want to do it, now is on the ball's in the tribe's court to develop a common curriculum. Mm-hmm. So that's, sometimes it's interesting getting 13 bands of one nation together to come up with an agreed upon curriculum.
What does civility mean to you when you conceptualize it?
Civility is being able to, it's taken from the word being civil. It's how you treat others. My great uncle once said that he thought that the tribes and the greater non-tribal community was kind of like, he put the analogy in one of the documentaries we did as the turtle and the hare. The tribes are more like the turtle. As you go across the history, slow and steady, they're getting to a better place. They're going to get to the finish line, but through all the changes, through the Spanish period, Mexican period, American period, termination area of the 50s and 60s, until you get into really the 1970s and 80s with self-determination for tribes, it didn't really change until for the last 30 years, the policies for tribes to be able to create their own economies. So we know about civility, about survival, and about treating others with respect. That's what we would want, is to know our history, know who we are, and be a good neighbor. And that's, I think, what the Kumeyaay way of life is. They talk about the Kumeyaay history of giving. So Sycuan has quite a large charitable outreach. So do some of the other tribes, and it's something that fits into our historical culture. Even when the Spanish first arrived, the tribes were there to offer them shelter. It was not reciprocated, but as history goes to show. But I think 250 years later, that's still the essence of what we're taught: is to feed, shelter, clothe people, visitors to your homeland. And one way, everybody is, if not Aboriginal, not Indigenous, they are immigrants in one form or another. So, and that's another thing we got to recognize, is even in this political turmoil that we have as of late, especially on immigration policies, the tribes know that firsthand. There's a land of opportunity here, and everybody deserves to be treated with respect and have their fair share.